Jake Morrison stood in the great hall of the Galactic Council ship, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The ceiling stretched up so high he could barely see it, and strange lights danced across walls made of something that looked like crystal, but felt warm to the touch. Around him sat beings that his mind still struggled to understand. Even after 3 years of diplomatic meetings, the Krullian delegate was the size of a small building, with skin that looked like living, metal and 4 arms that moved with deadly grace. Its eyes glowed red in the dim light, and when it spoke, the sound came from somewhere deep in its chest, like thunder rolling across mountains. Next to it sat a creature that Jake could only describe as a living shadow with too many teeth, representing something called the Void Collective. On his left, a being made entirely of what appeared to be flowing water held the seat for the Aquatic Union, while crystalline entities that sang instead of spoke represented the Harmonic Empire. 12 species in total, each one possessing abilities that made them seem like gods compared to humans. Jake cleared his throat and stepped forward. He wore his best dress uniform, the one with all of Earth's highest medals, though he knew they meant nothing here. A small device in his ear translated the alien languages into English, but it couldn't translate the feeling of being utterly outmatched. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Jake began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I come before you today not just as Earth's ambassador, but as a representative of humanity's hopes and dreams. For 50 years, we have worked. Prove ourselves worthy of joining your great alliance." High Chancellor Vextar, the Krullian leader, shifted in his massive chair. When he spoke, his voice made the floor vibrate. "Ambassador Morrison, your species has indeed shown enthusiasm. However, enthusiasm alone does not qualify a race for membership in our council. The water being flowed into a new shape, somehow managing to look thoughtful. Your people lack the natural defenses that have allowed our species to survive in this dangerous galaxy," it said in a voice like waves against rocks. "You have no armor plating like the Krullians. You cannot phase through solid matter like the Void Collective. You possess no telepathic abilities like the Mindari." Jake felt his heart sink, but he pressed on. "What we lack in natural abilities, we make up for in determination and creativity. Humans have shown time and again that we can adapt to any situation. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed other species." One of the crystalline beings chimed in with a sound like wind through crystal caves. "Your technological advancement is severely limited compared to our standards. Your fastest ships would take centuries to cross distances we travel in days. Your weapons could not penetrate even our most basic defensive systems." "But we learn quickly," Jake said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Give us access to your knowledge, and we'll prove that humans can contribute to the galaxy. We offer fresh perspectives, new ways of thinking, and an unbreakable will to protect what matters." The shadow creature spoke next, its voice like whispers in an empty room. "We have observed your species for these 50 years, Ambassador. You are short-lived, fragile, and lack any exceptional abilities. Your average lifespan is barely a century, while most of our species live for thousands of years. You break easily and heal slowly. Your minds cannot process information at the speeds required from modern galactic warfare." High Chancellor Vextar raised one of his massive hands for silence. "The Council has deliberated extensively on this matter. We have reviewed all data regarding human capabilities, technology, and potential contributions to our alliance." Jake held his breath. This was it. 50 years of work, of hoping, of dreaming that humanity could take its place among the stars as equals, rather than as primitive beings begging for scraps of knowledge. "The decision is unanimous," Vextar continued. "Humanity's application for membership in the Galactic Council is permanently rejected. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He felt his knees go weak and had to grab the podium to keep from falling. Permanently? He managed to whisper. Your species possesses no qualities that would benefit the Council, the water being explained, in what might have passed for a gentle tone. You are too weak to serve as warriors, too short-lived to serve as advisors, too technologically primitive to contribute meaningful research, and too emotionally unstable to be trusted with sensitive information. The crystalline entity added its chiming voice to the rejection. Furthermore, your species shows dangerous tendencies toward violence and unpredictability. Your history is filled with wars fought over trivial differences. You lack the unity and wisdom necessary for galactic citizenship. Jake straightened up, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he had. You're making a mistake. Humans may not be the strongest or the smartest or the longest lived, but we have something you've overlooked. We never give up. When everything seems impossible, we find a way. The shadow creature made a sound that might have been laughter. Stubbornness is not a qualification for council membership, Ambassador. It is, in fact, another mark against your species. High Chancellor Vextar stood up, his massive form casting Jake in shadow. All technology transfers to Earth are hereby terminated. All cultural exchange programs are canceled. All research partnerships are dissolved. Humanity will receive no further assistance from any council member species. You're abandoning us, Jake said, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. You're cutting us off completely. We are returning you to your natural state, Vextar replied. Perhaps in a few thousand years, if your species survives, evolves beyond its current limitations, you may resubmit your application, though we consider this unlikely. Jake watched as the alien delegates began to file out of the chamber, each one ignoring him as if he were invisible. The crystal beings chimed a farewell that sounded like a funeral song. A water creature flowed away without a backward glance. The shadow entity simply faded from view. Only High Chancellor Vextar remained, looking down at the small human with what might have been pity. Your species fought bravely to reach the stars, Ambassador Morrison. But bravery without strength is meaningless in this galaxy. Go home. Protect your small world as best you can with your limited abilities. The greater universe has no place for the weak. Jake stood alone in the empty chamber as the great ship prepared to leave Earth's orbit. Through the transparent walls, he could see his home planet growing larger as the alien vessel departed. Blue and green and beautiful, but now more isolated than ever. He activated his communicator with shaking hands. Earth Command, this is Ambassador Morrison. Mission failed. They've rejected us permanently and cut off all aid. We're on our own. The response came immediately from Lisa Chun, Earth's Chief Science Officer. Understood, Jake. Come home. We have work to do. As Jake made his way to the shuttle bay, he didn't know that this moment of abandonment would become the turning point in human history. He couldn't see that the galaxy's greatest mistake would become humanity's greatest opportunity. All he knew was that his species had been judged and found wanting by beings who measured strength only in armor thickness and energy output. The galaxy had abandoned humanity as weak and worthless. They would live to regret that decision. 100 years had passed since the galaxy turned its back on humanity. Lisa Chun was long dead, buried with honors on Luna Station, where she had spent her final years, pushing human science beyond what anyone thought possible. In her place stood her great-granddaughter, Dr. Kevin Wright, who had inherited not just her brilliant mind, but also her burning desire to prove the aliens wrong. Kevin stood in the observation deck of the Mars Industrial Complex, watching massive ships take shape in the orbital yards that now surrounded the red planet like a metal ring. These weren't the clumsy vessels that humans had built when they first reached for the stars. These were something entirely new, born from a century of necessity and innovation. The hull plating is responding perfectly to the stress tests, reported Maria Santos, Earth's chief engineer. Her voice came through the communication system from the construction site, where she was overseeing the final touches on humanity's newest creation. The nanomesh adapts faster than we hoped. It goes from flexible as cloth to harder than diamond in less than a second. Kevin nodded, watching through the massive windows as robotic arms guided sections of living metal into place. The ship they were building didn't just carry armor. It was armor, every surface designed to think and react to threats before human. Minds could even process them. The aliens had rejected humanity for being weak and fragile. Now humans were building machines that made weakness irrelevant. Captain Alex Turner floated outside the station in the newest version of human combat gear. Where the old spacesuits had been bulky and limiting, this new equipment flowed around him like a second skin. The adaptive combat system responded to his thoughts, changing from a lightweight exploration suit to full battle armor as he moved through different test scenarios. The response time keeps improving, Alex reported as he twisted through a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible in the old gear. The suit knows what I need before I do. When I think about needing more protection, the armor thickens. When I need to move fast, it becomes lighter. It's like having a conversation with my equipment. Down on the surface of Mars, Dr. Helen Garcia was running her own experiments. The underground labs she had built were testing the limits of human adaptability, not through genetic changes that would make them into something else, but through technology that enhanced what they already were. Subject is now breathing methane atmosphere with no external life support. She spoke into her recorder as she watched a volunteer walk calmly through an environment that would have killed any unprotected human in seconds. Heart rate remains normal. The adaptive nanites are converting the toxic gases into breathable air inside his lungs. Temperature is holding steady despite the -40-degree environment. The volunteer, a young technician named Danny Kim, waved at the observation window. His skin had taken on a slight blue tint as the nanites in his bloodstream adjusted his biology to handle the harsh conditions. But he was still human, still Danny, just a human who could survive anywhere. How do you feel? Helen asked through the intercom. Fine, Danny replied, his voice clear despite breathing an atmosphere that should have burned his lungs. A little cold, but that's getting better. The nanites are learning what I need. This was humanity's answer to a century of abandonment. They couldn't grow natural armor like the Krillians or phase through matter like the Void Collective. But they could build technology that gave them abilities the galaxy had never imagined. More importantly, they had learned to work together in ways that made them stronger than the sum of their parts. Commander Nina Davis led a training exercise in the asteroid belt, where human miners had been carving out resources for decades. Her ship, the New Horizon, moved through the rocky field with a grace that would have amazed the aliens who had once dismissed human technology. But it wasn't just the ship that impressed. It was how her crew worked together. Contact on the port side called out Lieutenant Frank Roberts from his position at the sensors. Before he had even finished speaking, the ship was already turning. Pilot Lucy Adams had anticipated the command and started the maneuver. Weapons Officer Kate Williams had charged the defensive systems. Engineer Steve Martinez had rerouted power to shields. They moved like parts of a single mind, each person knowing instinctively what the others needed. A century of being alone in their corner of the galaxy had taught humans something the other species had never learned. They had learned to trust each other completely. Beautiful work, Nina said as the exercise ended. The aliens have species that can read each other's minds, but I don't think even they work together this smoothly. The ship's communication system crackled to life with a message from Earth Command. All vessels, This is Admiral Peter Clark. New contact, approaching the edge of our sensor network. Unknown design, not matching any known human signatures. Every human in the solar system felt their heart skip a beat. For 100 years they had been alone. No alien ship had come near Earth since the day they were abandoned. Now something was out there, and nobody knew what it wanted. Should we prepare defensive positions? Asked Captain Turner from his training ground near Jupiter. Not yet, Admiral Clark replied. Let's see what they want. But all ships are too. Remain ready. If this is another species coming to tell us we're not good enough, they're going to get a very different reception than they expect. Kevin Wright watched from Mars as human ships throughout the solar system moved into loose formations. They didn't look threatening, but anyone with military knowledge would recognize the positioning. Every ship could support every other ship. Every weapon could cover multiple firing angles. Every vessel was prepared to adapt to whatever came next. 100 years, Kevin said quietly to Maria as they watched the careful dance of human spacecraft. 100 years of being told we were too weak to matter. Maria smiled, her eyes fixed on the ships that represented everything humanity had become. They're about to find out what humans do when they're left alone to grow strong. The unknown. Contact was still hours away from reaching human space. But for the first time in a century, humanity wasn't facing the unknown alone. They had each other, and they had technology that could adapt to anything. Most importantly, they had learned that being abandoned by the galaxy didn't mean being. Abandoned by hope, whatever was coming toward Earth would find humans very different from the species that had once begged for acceptance from the Galactic Council. They would find a people who had turned isolation into strength, weakness into wisdom, and abandonment into independence. The galaxy had made humanity strong by leaving them alone. Soon, they would discover just how strong humans had become. The ship that entered human space was dying. Admiral Peter Clark could see that much from the first sensor readings as the alien vessel limped toward Earth's outer defense grid. Its hull was scarred with damage unlike anything in the human military. Databases. The metal looked eaten away, as if something had tried to dissolve it from the inside out. Sir, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, reported Communications Officer Jenny Lopez from her station on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Defender. The translation systems are having trouble with the language, but it appears to be a distress call. Peter studied the approaching ship through the main viewer. It was clearly Krillian design, with the heavy armor plating and multiple weapon ports that marked their military vessels. But something was terribly wrong with it. Parts of the ship seemed to flicker in and out of existence, as if reality itself couldn't decide whether the vessel was really there. Patch me through to there. Communications, Peter ordered. Let's see what brought one of our old friends back to Earth after 100 years. The view screen filled with static before resolving into the image of a Krillian officer. Peter recognized the species immediately, though this individual looked nothing like the proud, arrogant beings who had once dismissed humanity, the aliens. Metal-like skin was dull and scarred. 2 of his forearms hung limp at his sides. Most disturbing of all, his glowing red eyes kept flickering like dying lights. This is Captain Ziegler of the Krillian Border Defense, the alien said, his voice weak and filled with pain. I carry an urgent message for the Galactic Council. Please relay immediately to all member species. Peter leaned forward in his chair. Captain, this is Admiral Peter Clark of Earth Defense Command. The Galactic Council abandoned humanity a century ago. We're no longer part of their communication network. The Krillian's eyes widened in what might have been surprise or horror. Earth Command, you must warn them. Something is coming from the edge of the galaxy. Something that devours everything it touches. Worlds, ships, entire star systems just disappear. Disappear how? Peter asked, though something cold was growing in his stomach. They don't just destroy, Ziegmer said, his voice growing weaker. They unmake things. My home world of Krylon Prime had 15 billion inhabitants and 3 defensive fleets. Now, there's nothing there. Not debris, not ruins, not even empty space. It's like the entire system never existed. Dr. Kevin Wright had arrived on the bridge and was listening intently to the transmission. Captain, what exactly did you see? What do these attackers look like? Ziegmer turned his fading eyes toward the human scientist. That's the problem. We don't know. They exist somewhere between dimensions. Our sensors can barely detect them. They appear as shadows that move against the light, consuming everything they touch. Energy weapons pass right through them. Physical barriers mean nothing. They just flow around or through any defense we build. The transmission started to break up as the Kryllian ship systems failed further. How many species have they hit? Peter asked urgently. 7 confirmed extinct, came the crackling reply. The Mindari Collective tried to fight them with telepathic attacks. The creatures absorbed their psychic energy and used it to grow stronger. The Synthesis Union deployed their most advanced technology. The attackers turned those same weapons against their creators. Peter felt a chill run down his spine. Where are they now? Moving toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach Council space within 2 years, maybe less. Ziegmer's image flickered as his ship's power failed. The Council must be warned. All species must unite against this threat, or the galaxy dies. The transmission cut out as the Kryllian ship finally lost all power. Peter watched the dead vessel drift silently through space, a tune carrying the last message from a dying civilization. Get me a channel to all human colonies and stations, Peter ordered. Priority Alpha, this is not a drill. Within hours, every human outpost in the solar system was buzzing with activity. Reports began flooding in from deep space monitoring stations that had been watching the galaxy's edge for decades. The information painted a picture of horror that made even the hardened military officers pale. Commander Nina Davis studied the tactical displays in the war room beneath. Mars Command. Red zones marked areas where star systems had simply vanished. From all sensors, the pattern was clear and terrifying. Something was eating its way through the galaxy like a cosmic plague. The reports match what the Kryllian captain described, she told the assembled military leaders. Entire civilizations are just gone. Not destroyed, not conquered. Erased as if they never existed. Captain Alex Turner pointed to the holographic display showing the galaxy. Look at the pattern. They're not moving randomly. They're following the trade routes, hitting the most populated systems first. It's like they're specifically targeting centers of civilization. Dr. Helen Garcia had been analyzing the scanner data from the dead Kryllian ship. I'm seeing something disturbing in these readings. The damage to their vessel isn't from conventional weapons. It looks like something tried to rewrite the atomic structure of their hull. Whatever these creatures are, they don't just break things. They change the fundamental rules of how matter works. Maria Santos looked up from her engineering reports. Sir, if these things can alter physical laws, then everything we know about defense becomes useless. Our armor, our weapons, our shields, all of it is based on the assumption that physics works the same way for everyone. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Humanity had spent a century building defenses against conventional threats. But how do you fight an enemy that can change the very nature of reality? Admiral Clark stood before the massive display showing the approaching threat. We need more information. Launch deep space reconnaissance drones toward the last known positions of the consumed systems. I want to know everything we can learn about these creatures before they get any closer to human space. Lieutenant Kate Williams raised her hand. From her position at the intelligence desk, Sir, there's something else. According to the Krillian data, these creatures aren't just consuming matter and energy. They're also absorbing information. Every civilization they encounter makes them smarter and more dangerous. The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Whatever was coming toward the galaxy wasn't just unstoppable. It was learning from every victory, growing stronger with each world it consumed. How long before they reached the galactic core? Peter asked. Nina checked her calculations. At their current rate of expansion, assuming they continue following the major trade routes, they'll hit the most populated council worlds in 18 months. Peter nodded grimly. Then we have 18 months to figure out how to fight something that every other species in the galaxy has failed to stop. As the meeting broke up and officers scattered to their duties, Peter remained standing before the display. Somewhere out there in the darkness between stars, something was coming that had already proven capable of erasing entire civilizations from existence. The galaxy that had once rejected humanity as too weak was about to face its greatest test. Whether they liked it or not, humanity might be the only species left with enough time to find an answer. Admiral Peter Clark was reviewing defense plans in his office when the impossible message arrived. The quantum communication array at Luna Station had detected a transmission on frequencies that only humanity used, frequencies that the Galactic Council had no knowledge of because humans had developed them entirely on their own during their century of isolation. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," said Lieutenant Kate Williams as she burst into his office without knocking. Her face was pale and her hands shook slightly as she held the data pad. "The message is from High Chancellor Vextar himself." Peter took the pad and read the first line. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. After 100 years of silence, the being who had personally rejected humanity was now reaching out to them directly. The message was brief and desperate. "Admiral Clark of Earth Defense Command, this is High Chancellor Vextar of the Galactic Council. Our situation has become critical. The entities we now call the Devourers have consumed 40% of Council space. Every conventional weapon and defense has failed. We formally request immediate military assistance from humanity against this existential threat to all life in the galaxy." Peter read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. The proud species that had once called humans too weak to matter were now begging for help from the very people they had abandoned. "Get me a secure channel to President Katie Johnson," Peter ordered, "and call an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The galaxy is about to find out what humans have been doing for the past 100 years." Within hours, Earth's leadership had gathered in the secure conference room deep beneath the Capitol. President Johnson sat at the head of the table, her expression grim as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Galactic Front. "The situation is worse than we thought," reported Dr. Kevin Wright, who had been analyzing the scattered data from refugee ships. "The Devourers have completely destroyed the Krillian Empire. The Mindari Collective is gone. The Synthesis Union lasted only 3 weeks against them. Species that ruled star systems for millions of years are just memories." Now, Colonel Steve Martinez, commander of Earth's Special Forces, studied the tactical displays. "From what we can tell, these creatures adapt to every weapon used against them. Energy weapons become useless after the first few shots. Kinetic weapons are absorbed and turned back on the attackers. Even gravity weapons just make them stronger." "President." Johnson leaned back in her chair. "So the galaxy that rejected us for being weak is now asking us to save them from something they can't handle. The irony would be amusing if billions of lives weren't at stake." Dr. Helen Garcia had been running calculations on her portable computer. "Madam President, based on the Devourer's current rate of expansion, they'll reach Earth in approximately 5 years. Even if we refuse to help the Council, we'll still have to face these creatures eventually. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed that information. Humanity could ignore the galaxy's plea for help, but they couldn't escape the threat forever. What are our chances if we wait for them to come to us? Asked Admiral Clark. Colonel Martinez shook his head. Not good. Every species they consume makes them stronger and smarter. By the time they reach Earth, they'll have absorbed the knowledge and abilities of dozens of advanced civilizations. We'd be facing an enemy that knows everything the galaxy's greatest minds ever learned. President Johnson stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the rebuilt Earth below. Cities stretched to the horizon, connected by gleaming transport tubes and dotted with parks where children played under alien trees that had adapted to human soil. This was what humanity had built during their century of abandonment. This was what they had to protect. Prepare the solar defense fleet for immediate deployment, she decided. We're not doing this to save the species that rejected us. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and because we'll have to fight these creatures eventually, anyway. Admiral Clark activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Earth Command. Operation Galaxy Shield is now active. Prepare for departure to the galactic front within 72 hours. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Alex Turner, aboard the cruiser Independence, confirmed his ship's readiness. Commander Nina Davis reported that her battle group could launch within 48 hours. Maria Santos announced that the new adaptive weapon systems were fully operational and ready for field testing. But it was the message from Dr. Lisa Chun's great-great-grandson, now serving as a science officer on the exploration vessel Discovery, that best captured humanity's response. Earth Command, this is Lieutenant Commander Richard Stone. My great-great-grandmother always said that humans shine brightest when everything seems impossible. Let's prove her right. As the solar defense fleet prepared for departure, humanity made modifications to their ships that the galaxy had never seen. The adaptive armor systems were upgraded to respond not just to physical threats, but to changes in the fundamental laws of physics. The weapons were designed to operate on multiple dimensional frequencies. Most importantly, the crews were trained to work together with a coordination that no other species could match. Colonel Martinez led the first wave of troops through their final training exercises. These weren't the desperate, fragile humans that the galaxy remembered. These were soldiers whose equipment could adapt to any environment, whose bodies could survive in conditions that would kill any other species, and whose minds were linked by communication systems that allowed them to fight as a single organism. Remember, Martinez told his troops as they boarded their ships, we're not going out there to prove we're worthy of the galaxy's respect. We already know what humans are capable of. We're going to show them what they missed when they abandoned. U.S. The departure of the Solar Defense Fleet was unlike anything in human history. Ships that incorporated a century of innovation and determination launched from every human world. The vessels moved with grace and purpose, their adaptive systems already beginning to analyze the threats they would soon face. As Admiral Clark watched the fleet disappear into hyperspace from the bridge of his flagship, he received one final message from High Chancellor Vextar. Admiral Clark, we are grateful beyond words for humanity's assistance. We know we have no right to ask for your help after how we treated your species. Peter smiled grimly as he composed his reply. Chancellor, we're not coming to save you because you asked. We're coming because someone has to stop these creatures, and it turns out the species you considered too weak to matter might be the only ones capable of doing it. The message sent, Peter turned his attention to the tactical displays showing their destination. Somewhere ahead lay an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. But for the first time in over a year, the creatures would face something they had never encountered before. They would face humanity, and humanity never gave up. The Kepler defense line stretched across 3 star systems, representing the last stand of galactic civilization. When Colonel Steve Martinez arrived with the human fleet, he found the remnants of 6 different species military forces huddled, behind energy barriers that flickered and sparked with overload warnings. The alien commanders who greeted him looked nothing like the proud beings who had once rejected humanity. High Chancellor Vextar's armor was cracked and dented. His glowing red eyes had dimmed to barely visible embers. Around him, representatives from the surviving council species bore the marks of desperate battles against an enemy they couldn't understand. "Admiral Martinez," Vextar said, his once thunderous voice now barely a whisper, "our forces have been holding this line for 6 days. We estimate the Devourers will break through within hours. Every weapon we possess has proven useless against them." Steve studied the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy. The Devourers appeared as dark spots that seemed to bend space around them, moving through the galaxy like holes cut in reality itself. Wherever they passed, stars went out and planets simply ceased to exist. "Have you tried anything other than direct attacks?" Steve asked. A crystalline being from the Harmonic Empire chimed weakly. "What else is there? We have the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. If they cannot stop these creatures, nothing can." Steve smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a genuine expression of confidence. "That's where you're wrong. You've been trying to fight them the same way you've fought every enemy for millions of years. But humans learned something during our century alone. Sometimes the answer isn't to hit harder. Sometimes you need to think differently." The first Devourer attack began 3 hours later. The creatures flowed toward the defense line like living shadows, absorbing every energy blast fired at them. Kinetic weapons passed through them harmlessly. Gravity bombs only made them grow larger and more aggressive. But when the human ships moved into position, they did something the galaxy had never seen. Instead of forming rigid battle lines, they flowed around the Devourers like water, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. "All units implement Adaptive Formation 7, Steve commanded from the bridge of his flagship. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them yet. We're trying to understand them." Dr. Richard Stone, working from a mobile laboratory built into a heavily armored research vessel, monitored the Devourers' behavior as human ships danced around them. "Colonel, I'm seeing something interesting. When our weapons hit them, there's a brief moment where they seem to exist fully in our dimension before they adapt." "How brief?" Steve asked, watching his tactical display as human pilots pushed their ray ships through maneuvers that would have been impossible without their adaptive technology. "Microseconds, but it's there. And during that time, they're vulnerable to physical laws as we understand them." Captain Alex Turner's voice crackled over the communication system from his position near the front lines. "Sir, something else. When they absorb our energy weapons, they seem confused for a moment, like they're trying to process information they don't understand." Steve felt the first spark of an idea forming in his mind. "Richard, what if they're not from our reality at all? What if they're beings from a universe where physics works differently?" The scientist was quiet for a moment as he analyzed the data streaming in from sensors throughout the human fleet. "That would explain everything. They're not adapting to our weapons. They're translating them into their own physical laws. But during that translation process, they're vulnerable," Steve finished. "But only for microseconds, and only if we can hit them with something they can't translate." Lieutenant Kate Williams, monitoring communications from her post aboard the command ship, suddenly looked up with excitement. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange. The Devourers are generating some kind of signal. It's not in any language we know, but the pattern suggests they're trying to communicate." Steve made a decision that would have seemed insane to any other military commander in galactic history. "Patch me through to them, Let's see if we can talk." The response came immediately, not as words, but as images and emotions transmitted directly into the minds of everyone in the human fleet. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a waterfall, but the adaptive technology in their neural interfaces quickly adjusted to filter the information. What they saw changed everything. The Devourers weren't invaders. They were refugees, fleeing from a dying universe where the fundamental forces that held matter together were breaking down. They had crossed into this reality through tears in space-time, but their very existence was poisonous to a universe built on different physical laws. "They're dying," Richard Stone whispered as the images continued to flow through the communication link. "They're consuming our matter because it's the only thing that can sustain them in this reality. But every world they consume brings them closer to complete dissolution." The alien commanders watching the human fleet's actions were stunned into silence. While they had spent months throwing increasingly powerful weapons at an enemy they couldn't understand, humanity had accomplished first contact in a matter of hours. "How is this possible?" High Chancellor Vextar asked, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. Steve turned to face the assembled alien leaders. "Because we learned something during our century of abandonment. When you've been rejected by everyone, you learn to look for solutions that nobody else has tried. You told us we were too weak to contribute to the galaxy. But what you saw as weakness was actually our greatest strength." Working with Dr. Stone and the human research teams, they began developing something that had never been attempted before. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers, they would build bridges between dimensions, allowing the creatures to return to a reality compatible with their existence. The construction took every human ship and required coordination beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But humans had spent a century learning to work together as if they shared a single mind. While alien species struggled with communication delays and conflicting agendas, human crews moved with perfect synchronization. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos led the engineering teams as they modified their adaptive technology to interface with trans-dimensional space. Captain Nenia Davis coordinated the fleet movements necessary to position the dimensional gateway generators. Every human in the battle zone worked toward a single goal with unwavering determination. The moment of truth came as the dimensional gates activated, creating stable pathways between realities. The Devourers, sensing salvation after eons of desperate hunger, began flowing toward the gateways like water, finding its level dot as the last of the creatures disappeared into their home dimension. The galaxy fell silent. Entire species that had ruled star systems for millions of years stood in awe of what they had just witnessed. High Chancellor Vextar approached Admiral Clark as the human fleet prepared to return home. "We were wrong about your species," he sighed, his voice carrying the weight of a century of regret. "We measured strength by armor thickness and energy output. We never understood that true strength comes from the ability to find new solutions when all the old ones fail." Steve looked out at the stars that were once again safe, then back at the alien leader who had once dismissed humanity as worthless. "The galaxy spent 100 years convinced we were too weak to matter. But you never understood what humans do when everyone gives up on us." "What do you do?" Vextar asked. Steve smiled. "We prove them wrong." As the human fleet departed for Earth, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, not through superior weapons or natural abilities, but through the one quality the universe would always need: the refusal to believe that any problem was impossible to solve.